Hello, this is Tracy Armstrong with Truth Unveiled. I'm so excited to be with you today. I love bringing content that will help you, that will encourage you, but content that will challenge you. I hope you are in all things challenged, encouraged, and empowered today with my guest, Daniel Lapin. He's going to be with us, Rabbi Daniel Lapin. Now, he's known as America's number one leading rabbi. I believe it. He's a friend of mine. We've known each other, we've done work together for many years. Love him and Susan and their family. And we're expecting some good content to come out, some good conversation, as we're just going to just kind of pull up around the table. If we've done so many times, pull up around the table and we start interacting and communicating, and good things always come out. So get ready. Just after this intro, we're going to have Rabbi Daniel Lapin with us today on Truth Unveiled. Well, Rabbi Daniel Lapin, glad to have you here with me today and all of our audience on Truth Unveiled. Now, we like to talk about fun things. We like to talk. We just have a great time. I never forget the time that you invited me to your house for Shabbat. We were interviewing on TBN, and just after the interview, you said, "Would you come to my house for Shabbat?" And that was a beautiful experience. Learned so much, encountered so much, and had just a great time with you and your family. And you brought some guests in, and it was a wonderful time. Then we had other times of dinner and Shabbat, not only in Washington but also in the Baltimore D.C. area. So, Rabbi Daniel,
And
welcome to Truth Unveiled. Glad that you're here.
thank you, Pastor Tracy. Yeah, no, it's been many years. I can't even figure out, but it's a long time. Do you remember we once did a multi-day program in Southern California?
Yes, yes, I do. Down in Corona
Yes.
area of Southern California.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
We,
Right.
we've done a few things. We've done a few things. We used to do a conference here in Seattle area called the Big Conference, and that
It's
was
right.
around business and wealth creation. And so
Yeah,
we've
we share
been
so
doing this.
many interests, so it makes sense.
And I never forget the time that you came and you spoke at our church, and it was we were driving to from one location from Des Moines to Bellevue, and we were talking about just why war was continuing, why peace couldn't be captured and peace couldn't be had. And you mentioned that it was the occupation of those that just refused to have peace. And I think at the time it was the Taliban and ISIS. There was just their occupation. It's what they do. And so today I want to get into some of the discussion. We have a lot of things going on in the earth right now. We look at the headlines, and I was just, I'm just amazed at what's happening on the campus of UCLA and what's happening around the world and what's happening in Israel. But we can jump into that. First of all, how are you and Susan, and how's the ministry?
Yeah, all wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Much to be grateful for.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And you have a new book that came out.
We do. We're very excited with it. It's in many ways the summation of things we've been talking about on the radio and at conferences and on television for many years. It's called The Holistic You,
Okay.
integrating the 5 fundamental facts in life: your finances, your family, your faith, your fitness, and your friendships.
Yeah, the most important 5 there are. So you cover that. And so I would encourage everyone to get the holistic you and learn more about how to walk that out, walk into that. So before I have any questions or anything that you just want to jump into, and just things that are on your mind, your heart, you would like to have a conversation around.
Well, perhaps, I've been hearing from a lot of happy warriors around the world lately asking me whether what is happening at Columbia University and at UCLA and at George Washington and many, many, many other university campuses around the country in terms of hostility towards Jews, whether this makes me think that it's in some way similar to Germany in 1938. My answer is that is not the case. In 1934, Hitler was made a chancellor over Germany by Hindenburg, and then when Hindenburg died, he declared himself president and chancellor, or then he called himself Führer, the leader. And number one, there isn't anyone like that. And number two, the leftist beliefs, and people often think of Nazism as a right-wing thing, but it wasn't. Nazi stands for National Socialist. It was a socialist party. They nationalized much of industry. And so the most important difference, I think, is that while the Nazi Party reached a membership high of 10% of the German population, which is 8 million people back then, the fact is, though, that the support they got from the countrywide was very high. Hitler did appear to be a bit of a miracle worker. The horrible economic conditions, the terrible inflation, he provided an answer to that right away. And the humiliation that even non-Nazis felt in the wake of World War One, they felt their national pride returning. So Hitler had a lot of support. But in America, I told people that what's going on here is really going on with the university-centric population on the coasts. And another way of defining it, I'd be interested in how you react to this, Pastor Tracy, but I think the primary difference is between people who work with ideas and words and people who work with things. And by that, I mean to say that when you work with things, you see, I have an inherent trust for people who work with things. If I'm talking to a crane driver, I just, it doesn't enter my mind that he's trying to stab me in the back, because I think he's accustomed to working with reality. If you overload the crane, it'll fall over. That's a reality. There are rules in his world. If I speak with a carpenter, right, there's only so much stress you can put on a wooden stud, and if you drill through most of it in order to install an electrical conduit, then you're cutting its strength. These are realities. And so one of the nice things about being with folks who work with things is that they have an understanding that they live in a world of rules and restrictions. If you're building a bridge, you can't do whatever you like. It's got to be able to take the weight. It's got to be built for the budget. It's got to be able to withstand not only gravity, but wind force. They're living in a world where there are realities. And if you say to a plumber, here's what I want to do, I want to run copper piping here, there, and there, I want to put in these fitting, he'll say to you, can't do that for your budget. It's just not possible. Or he's going to say, look, it's going to the water flow is going to be problematic. You can't do it the way you want to do it, which is exactly what you want to hear from him, what works and what doesn't work. But when you talk to a psychologist who is focused on gender, there are no limits in that world. And if that person says a boy and a girl are exactly the same and are interchangeable, there is no aspect of reality that's going to jump up and hit them in the face. Right. It's like being an archaeologist. You can tell future generations that a public toilet is a temple, and nobody's going to come back from the dead to contradict you. So these people are functioning in a limitless world of ideas where there are no, now, to just be sure, you and I spend most of our time working in the world of ideas.
Yes.
But the difference is that we both consider ourselves bound by the rules and the restrictions and the realities of Scripture.
Yes.
So if I say something and you pick up the phone and say, Lapin, I just heard you say this thing. Look, I'm a friend of yours, but I got to tell you, you're talking through your hat. That contradicts explicitly what you and I both know appears in, Exodus chapter 13. And all I can say is, yikes, thank you for telling me. You're absolutely right. You can't say whatever you like. But secular people who function in the world of ideas have only one concern, and that is popularity and publishing and credibility, and they can basically say whatever they like, particularly if it's in tune with the zeitgeist. As long as
Yeah.
they're swimming with the current, they can do whatever they like. So, what's going on there is an insanity. To side in what's going on in Israel today, to side with Hamas is crazy. And when I see a sign LGBT for Hamas, it's hilarious because they even overlook the fact that not that long ago, it was 2006, 2007, Hamas was busy throwing homosexuals off the roofs of buildings in Gaza. And so they operate in a la-la land. They operate in a world where there is no such thing as reality, and you do not have to live within the constraints of reality. It's incredibly appealing and intoxicating. You have limitless power. You can say what you like. You can pronounce what you like. And if the zeitgeist agrees that boys and girls are exactly interchangeable, well, then say it. You're a leader. You're cutting edge. It's incredible.
Well, I think it's amazing because I believe that we can track this a long ways, where in our institutions where we've been teaching and training the youth that are actually fighting for something that they don't understand right now. They're standing for something that they really don't understand. They don't understand the root system. They don't understand the byproduct. They don't understand the effect that it's going to have over time, that what they're fighting for. I mean, just the idea that Iran's going, we love these people that are fighting for us, and these are going to be our warriors in the future. They have no idea that they are literally saying to the nations, to the world, those that would stand against the great sinner, right? The great sinner, America, that they are empowering them to do horrible things to America, and they're empowering them. But I can go back to watching education a little bit, just seeing how the movement of there is no such thing as creation, it is evolution. That idea of evolution is fantasy, just as much fantasy as this. And yet they were able to make, silly putty or some kind of strings to these theories and try to pull them together. And then I realized that there was a generation that was just giving themselves over to randomness, random ideas, just random, that literally stories that didn't have any values to them, stories that didn't have moral values. I remember listening some of the modern stories. I'm thinking, what's the moral of the story? It didn't have one. It was just a story. It didn't have any value to be taken from it. And I would tell my children, watch out. These stories here that you're capturing, these stories that are being produced, they are literally for the sake of developing a random mindset, a random idea where you don't actually need to have an equation, 1 + 1 = 2. You can actually get to 1 + 0 and get a million. And so you can make it up. We've seen this progress that's been happening in this generation. They grew up on that kind of television, and now they're in school, which is really weird. They're in a university that's supposed to be about bettering the world, about changing the world, transforming the world. These thoughts and ideas are supposed to give us a higher level of living, not just a higher level of thinking. And these high thoughts, as you're saying, are just fantasy. I love how you said it. I love And I really appreciate the idea of the picture, the word picture, right? Those that work with things and those that work with ideas. Because those that work with ideas really have given themselves the permission to write their own laws and write their own rules.
They absolutely can, and it seems to me that perhaps um, much of the philosophy they generate, if you ask yourself what unifies these people there, um, it's a very strange bunch of people. The news just came out recently that of the people who were so-called students who were arrested at UCLA and at other universities, many of them, large numbers of them, were not registered students.
I would
So,
imagine.
professional agitators, uh, riot consultants, perhaps on the payroll of George Soros, perhaps.
Yes.
But what unifies them? Why they hate America, they hate Israel, they hate Jews, they hate capitalism. That's part of it as well. Where does this all come from? And I believe the answer is that they start off with a very basic presumption. And before I tell you what the presumption is, I have to just spend a minute here laying it out, which is that the fundamental question that we all have is where did we come from? I mean, if you sit next to a kid on an airplane and you start talking, and the kid will, very early on, the child will say, where are you from? Like, where do you live? Who, from where? And I think that that's an existential question we all ask as well, which is, how did we arrive on this planet? And the reality is that there are only two possible answers. One answer is that the good Lord created us in his image and placed us here. And the only other answer is that through a lengthy process of unaided materialistic evolution, primitive protoplasm, turned into plumbers and brain surgeons. And those are the only two possibilities, because you've got to ask this question. It's not as if the moon has a lot of people living on it and Mars has a lot of... No, at the moment, as far as we know, we appear to be alone in the universe. Now, I know that people say, how can that be? There must be people elsewhere. Fine, maybe there must be, but show me. Where are they? And we are, well, they're far away. We can't hear from them. Fine, okay. So who is making a bigger jump in ungrounded assumption? You saying that they're there, or me saying, show me? Who is being more scientific about it? Right. And so, and it gets worse than that, because not only are there deep-seated problems from molecular biology that permeate the evolutionary theory, none of that even tackles the even more profound problem, which is, how did non-organic materials turn into the very first form of life? And that has not been satisfactorily answered. People speak about the Miller-Urey experiment, where they used sparks to simulate lightning, and they try to simulate a primordial soup of water and gas and so on. But that failed. It produced a few molecules of methane, but it basically, nobody ever thought it was worthwhile going back and trying it to do some more, because it was such a failure. So it's hugely problematic. And yet there is so much of a determination to view the world in that spirit. In other words, your two choices are God-centric or godless. Those are the two choices. We got you with God or without him. And if it's without him, then you are forced to structure an entire worldview that's consistent with that. And it so happens that that would then be a materialistic worldview, because as soon as you admit the theme of a spiritual reality, you're on very, very slippery territory. You're on slippery ice. And so this is the reason that these people's fundamental drive is a drive towards a secular reality. And in a secular reality, people are nothing but sophisticated animals. Now, animals do not have money and animals do not have ownership. And so, not surprisingly, this philosophy, of which Marxism is a part, also eschews all personal property, all personal ownership and individual rights, and it becomes group in exactly the same way as animals do. And so, whether it's in the economic area or the political area, of course they have to hate Jews, because Jews pose an existential threat to their whole worldview. Jews shouldn't be around any more than Hittites should, or Jebusites, or Canaanites. I should be a fossil somewhere. But I've just finished celebrating Passover,
Yes.
which is an event that occurred over 3,000 years ago. And there hasn't been a single year in the intervening 3,000 years that the people of Israel have not observed the week-long celebration of Passover. The only explanation for this is God. Otherwise, it's insane. And so obviously Jews are a big problem to the materialistic worldview. Israel is a big problem. This is one of the reasons these people love universalism and they hate nationalism. They've even tried to turn nationalism into a bad word. But Israel is a nation of nationalists. It's a nation of people who see a consistent and remarkable unity between their language and their moral system and their land. And it's one that has existed for 3,000 years. And they're not about to walk away. They are nationalists. But the folks on the left who are conjuring up a materialistic worldview, they love the United Nations. They love the International Criminal Court in Holland. They love anything that's international. And this is one of the reasons they hate America, because what distinguishes America is its exceptionalism. America is a very unusual country, very unique, very special. And they cannot stand that. They hate that.
That's amazing. So there is an idea in that they hate nationalism. They hate, they're anti-Semite. They hate America, living in America, but they don't realize that supposedly maybe they see Islam as a philosophy. Maybe they don't see it as a religion. Maybe they see it more as a philosophy than it is a religion. What do you think about that? That they would embrace Islam, or they would embrace, maybe not even Islam, just the idea of Hamas, as the underdog, and that Israel is the, now the bully. Of course, not looking at history, not following any form of history. How could they embrace that? Because Islam is supposed to be a spiritual condition as well.
Yeah.
But they are not really embracing Islam, are they? They're fighting for they just want to fight. They just want to argue, right? Would you agree with that? There's just a contentious.
Well, let me go just a little bit further. It's very notable that while Bashar Assad in Syria was killing 130,000 Muslims, there were no protests. He was killing babies, women, children, men, no protests. When Muslims in northern Nigeria are kidnapping and raping and murdering, no protests. So why is it that these caring and compassionate, naive people are all up in arms because they believe incorrectly that Israel has killed thousands of civilians? The figures have been debunked already. Why do they get all upset when Israel kills Muslims, who started
Yeah.
the whole war, and they don't care when Muslims kill Muslims? That's a very peculiar thing.
Yeah.
And I have a slightly bizarre psychosexual explanation, which nonetheless, I believe, has much to recommend it as an explanation for what's going on. Because there was a remarkable video on the news that showed these American university students putting their heads down on the ground at the request of the Muslim leaders of the rally.
Hmm.
So these are the same people who would object mightily if anybody suggested a Christian prayer,
Yeah.
but they're just fine when a Muslim suggests a Muslim prayer and demands it, and they go along with it. How do you
Yes.
explain this? And I think part of it is a little bit like Stockholm syndrome, which is something that's been discovered
Yeah.
to happen, that when somebody has been a hostage, even of a terrible person, because that person is more powerful than you, and because that person has been, in a certain sense, protecting you and feeding you, you start forming an attachment to him in the same way that a woman forms an attachment to a man. A stronger man who protects her and looks after her and provides for her. And what's happened is that the West has become seriously feminized. Today, leadership in the West are all effeminate boys, or in fact girls. But there are no men leaders in the West, with the exception of Viktor Orban in Hungary. And you may not want to include Russia as part of the West, but Putin is a strong masculine leader. There are no other masculine leaders. Not, think of Canada, think of Trudeau. Really? A pretty boy. But what I think everybody agrees is that Muslims are pretty masculine. They kill, they care nothing about what you say or what you think. Your opinion means absolutely nothing to them. They'll go ahead and they'll tell you forthrightly, from the river to the sea, we mean to annihilate every last single Israeli. That they're very candid about it. They're not being circumspect or dishonest in any way. And so I think that these beardless, hollow children on the university campus are being seduced
Yeah.
by the first signs of strength and masculinity in public affairs that they've ever been exposed to. And their universities, by the reluctance to pick them up and throw them off the campus, is validating their opinion that everything in America is weak and feminine,
Yeah.
and without any strength, and Hamas is appealingly masculine. And I know it sounds a little bizarre, but when one thinks about it, you begin to see that there is something to this on a deep emotional level. They are yearning for masculine strength, which they probably never ever saw in their fathers, even.
Yeah. I would imagine, as you're just saying this, I'm thinking back to, well, first of all, the rise of both the homosexual and the transgender, all of that rising at the same time, rising at the same time. I remember when 9/11 happened. Just that year, before 9/11, I was mentioning to my wife, I grew up as a Muslim. I grew up around, reading the Quran, and I remember saying to my wife, I feel like there's an Islamic spirit in America. And when 9/11 hit, and I believe it was partly because of who was in office at the time. But when 9/11 hit, it was interesting to watch how America bounced back from it. not only did we have the number one selling book was the Bible after that, it just really took off, and it always has been, but it really just took off in sales. But the defense for Islam and the defense for what Muslims did from our president really was kind of that same, like a dog rolling over and just showing its belly and just allowing this to continue on because they didn't want hate crimes. But the fact is, it did perpetuate a Islamic Amalek spirit in the earth, in America, and it has just been growing, 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 growing. Now, to me, it's amazing to see that there is such an anti-Semitic and such a pro-Islam or pro-Hamas mindset right now after the trail of pain that has been released into this nation.
Yeah. And, you can see in other outposts of the West, you can see what's happened to France, Germany, and Sweden and Norway with huge immigration. And again, to some extent, what motivated the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, to bring in, 1 million men from the Middle East and North Africa? And the answer is that German men weren't being men; they weren't having babies.
Yeah.
The fertility rate in Germany, along with most other Western countries, is well below replacement.
Yeah, I just was
And
reading an
so,
article of just how low it is. I mean, it's
no, it's very low.
substantially low. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, 2.1 children per woman on average is replacement level. And Germany was down at 1.6 at that point. It's lower now. And, if you want to keep the factories at BMW and Mercedes running, then you need to have people. So she thought it would be a really good idea to bring in Muslims. And it didn't occur to him that there was a huge cultural barrier, part of which included Muslims wanting to not live in peace, but to take over.
Yeah.
Dominance is a basic theme in Islam. So where Christian and Jew would live comfortably together, Muslim and anybody else doesn't live together. Muslims need to dominate.
Yeah. I noticed when I was in Israel, it's very different when you go to the Christian quarters, the Muslim area or the Jewish area. It's all very different. Very different.
It's very, very different culture.
Interesting. So where do we go from here? How do we help those that are watching? Because there's a lot of people that are just afraid. They don't have any clue of what to expect. Is this going to get worse? Is there a turnaround? What can we expect?
Well, the reality is, and I'll tell you how I see it. It may not be the way everyone sees it, but the way I see it is that the only hope, and I agree, it's not a strong hope, and it's no guarantee, but the only direction in which any hope lies is the election of Donald Trump in November. That's my opinion. Yes. And I do believe that another Biden term pretty much signals the end. Now, what does the end mean? And I think that's important for our people. The end doesn't mean the end of you, your money, your finances, your family. It doesn't mean that at all. Because the general pattern, if you look at the lifespan of epochs and empires, whether you look at all the way back to the Babylonians or the pre-Tsarist Russian Empire, or the French, or even the British Empire, you find that all of these things last about 250 years, remarkably close to 250 years. For instance, the British Empire started with the Act of Union in 1700, and in the aftermath of World War II, 1950, with all the deaths and the decimation, it was about done. India was lost in 47. Most of the other Commonwealth nations achieved their independence soon after. So 250 years is what they get. Well, America is now, let me see, 1776. We are 248 years in. And so it would take something unusual. I mean, and you can see, right, the decline of the culture. Not a
Right.
single one of those empires I mentioned died because of an invasion or an enemy attack, or no, they all died because of loss of conviction in their own value.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing among the university centric idea generators and wordsmiths, in academia and entertainment and journalism and education. Um, and these people have no confidence whatsoever in the value of America.
Right.
And so there's every reason to suppose that, we're close to the end of the American era. um, it wasn't always the American era until 1950. It was the British era. The British they ruled the world. The reserve currency was the pound sterling. And in 1944, at Bretton Woods, it switched to the dollar. Well, nowhere is it written in granite that it's going to stay the dollar forever.
Right.
It might become the Chinese yuan, quite possibly. Things are changing. But anyway, my point is that in 1950, things were not good in England. There was inflation, the aftermath of World War II. The country felt down and beaten, and it really wasn't good. I was a boy with my family there in 1957, and I remember clearly. I remember me and my pals playing. Our playground were bombed out sites. Now, the war finished in 45. This is 57, 12 years later, and we're still playing in sites that had not recovered from Nazi bombs during the Blitz in September 1940. At the same moment, Hiroshima is already halfway rebuilt. Dresden is rebuilt. Berlin is rebuilt. So things were not looking good in England at all. But then I was back in England as a young student in 1963, 64, and it was swinging London. I don't know if you remember the British band invasion, all the Dave Clark Five and the Beatles and
Yeah.
Herman's Hermits and all the other. Britain was swinging. Now, it was never again going to be a leader in the world. It was a small country, but it was perfectly okay to live there. And that's the
Yeah.
point I'm making. We should not get dismal. Your primary responsibilities are to your family and to your finances and to your friends and to your own physical health and to your faith. And nothing is going to change in those things. It might at times be a little harder to make a living, at other times it might be a little easier. It might be a little harder to protect the moral innocence of your children at some times than at others, but it's doable. Maybe you have to homeschool. Maybe you have to get together with like-minded people and create a church school. But there are things you can do. And that's my point. I think it's important when we can discuss the macro issues of watching a deterioration in the country, and we can say rightly, you know what, it's looking as if this will never again be the country we once knew. It just won't. But that doesn't mean that we're through.
Right. I feel I know that in the past you and I we've worked we worked with business leaders. We've worked with
Yes.
people and our goal was to empower them to achieve to gain wealth, to get wealth, and to be empowered to get wealth. And I've had many people ask, I'm a pastor, you're a rabbi. Why would you do that? Why aren't you just focusing on the spiritual aspect? And I realized that the only way, and you mentioned it, let's say it's the yen, or let's say it's the pound sterling, that the strength of a nation was really around their economic power, their power
Yes.
to influence the world economically. And if we don't create wealth in America with new wealth, and create new wealth with raising up new people, young adults, helping families not just retire with, and I believe I've heard you say this, there is no such word in Hebrew as retire. retirement. And so, not retire, but to do something with your second half of life. This is going to be the strength, I think, of this nation. And as we are, and that fights the whole Marxism, that fights the whole socialistic, well, at least in somewhat, it fights this idea. And so I believe that one of the things, the reason I hear you with Donald Trump is I think Donald Trump is for the economic strength of America. He's not trying to destroy America. He's not trying to bring in moral decay. I think you are absolutely right with that. I believe we need to vote, but I believe we need to go to work. We need to build this nation with what we have, our skills, our ability, and strengthen those that have a wherewithal to do something about it. You train people. You're rabbi. You have biblical teaching. You have the 5 F's. But you're very strong in helping people find their
Oh, absolutely. No, I coach
stride.
people. I
Yeah.
coach people and I do training programs, because regardless of what's going on around, regardless of the macro picture, you can still take care of your family and your finances and maintain social connections and look after your health and retain a connection with God. All of that, regardless of what's going on around us, we can still do that. Look, I don't think Taiwan is going to be long for the West. Now, in my view, Taiwan will join China without a single bullet being fired. I think it's very significant that the blue coalition in Taiwanese politics is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And what they're saying to themselves is, financially, China is getting stronger and America is getting weaker. China's not worrying about diversity, equity, and inclusion. China's not saying girls can do jobs, physical jobs, as well as boys. China's not doing that. China is a very serious country. At the moment, America is a very silly country. Serious beats silly every single time.
Yeah.
And it's not going to even be a case of military strength. Taiwan will just look and say, you know what, America's getting weaker, China's getting stronger. America's turning out to be a very unreliable ally. Just look at Israel, and we're gonna start switching towards China. It's so inevitable. It's going to happen. It's going to happen soon.
Yeah. Well, that's so interesting. Is there anything else you would like to address? I just wanted to, at some point, could you tell me a little bit about because I feel like we had this conversation in the car about the spirit of Amalek, and how what's happening today is not foreign from what's been happening the whole time against, the Jews. Do you remember that conversation or something
Oh,
around that?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, no, sure. So Amalek is not a biological or racial classification. It's a spiritual one, and its deepest desire is the wiping out of Jews. Now, um, one of one can come up with a lot of different reasons of why Hitler lost World War II. The interesting thing is that each of the reasons stands by itself. And so, for instance, the fact that Hitler was one person, whereas every single Allied decision involved many people. It was the cabinet in England, it was Roosevelt and the capital in Washington, and the cabinet in Washington, D.C. It was many military commanders. In Germany, Hitler decided everything.
Yeah.
And there's a wisdom in numbers. You're always better off with
Yeah.
collaboration with other people. So, that's an example of one reason, and it's a good reason. It's true. It is a reason why Hitler lost the war. Another reason Hitler lost the war is his obsession with Jews. The people who developed the atomic bomb were mostly Jews with German accents. Hitler threw them out of Germany. And interestingly enough, the very first place in German society where anti-Semitism caught on, you'll like this, Pastor Tracy, were the German universities. In the 1930s already, they were throwing out Jewish professors. And many of the American scientists who developed the atom bomb were people who'd been thrown out of Germany. Had Hitler not been obsessed with Jews, they could have stayed in Germany, and Germany would have had the bomb. That would have been another way the war would have been won for Hitler. But he threw. And so, Amalek's obsession, they can't help themselves. When the spirit of Amalek overtakes a nation, they become obsessed to the point of self-destruction with Jews. And Hamas and Fatah and the ISIS and all of these Islamic groups are exactly there. Today they have adopted the mantle of Amalek from Deuteronomy and Exodus, and you can see that you can't possibly win Hamas by saying, "Hey, we'll give you a lot of money if you make peace with Israel." It's just not negotiable.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. Is there anything else you would like to share with us before we sign off?
Just that it's lovely to see you, and please give regards from Susan and me to Pastor Natalie and the children, and we'd love to see you again in reality, either again for a Shabbat meal with us here on the East Coast now, or if we do something together on the West Coast. But whatever, we look forward to being together with you again soon.
Well, I would love to do that. We are now in the process of establishing a new ministry on your side as well. So
Please keep me in the loop on that.
We'll keep you in the loop there. And then we would love to have you back on the West Coast. You can visit your old stomping grounds.
Yeah, which we miss terribly. I can't tell you how much we miss it.
Thank you. What is the best way to purchase your book?
Either on online booksellers or at my website, which is rabbidaniellapin.com.
Okay, rabbidaniellapin.com, or on any booksellers.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Please
it was great
Susan
talking anytime at all. It's a great honor to have the time together with you, and look forward to doing it again.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate your time.
All righty. God bless.
God bless. Well, there we have it. Rabbi Daniel Lapin, just the breakdown, the perspective, the insight. Follow him. He has a incredible podcast. You'll enjoy his podcast, and it's meaty, it's rich. And then Susan has a podcast. You'll enjoy her podcast as well. They have books, thought tools, and I think that's something that you want to make sure you get thought tools. You can get on an email to receive weekly thought tools, as well as get the accumulation of a thought tool throughout the year. So there's plenty of learning, plenty of training, plenty of teaching. And again, if you're looking for business coaching, looking for business training, go to rabbidaniellapin.com and find out as much as you possibly can. This is Tracy Armstrong. I want to say one more thing. I think it's very wise to vote this year towards what is going to bring health to our nation. And I believe that Donald Trump will be a healthy solution. I told you before that when Biden was in office, when he won the office, or however he got in office, that there was going to be moral decay. And we see today, 4 years later, I said that before he got in office, but nearly 4 years later, we see moral decay in America. And it's now stirring up what the boldness and the tenacity of the world to do incredible things, because there is no strong masculine leader. May we raise up strong masculine leaders in America again. May we see the strength in our leadership. May we see the fortitude and the boldness. I admire Winston Churchill. He's one of my studies and one of my heroes. I really appreciate his tenacity and being able to stand in the face of his modern day Amalek, which was Hitler. I believe we need that same kind of grit in the office, and I believe that Donald Trump will help us get there. Don't forget, increase, be strong, and we will see you next time on Truth Unveiled.